we've seen a 60% increase in attendance because we're able to provide that immediate wraparound support and help staff get back to feeling happy and healthy within the workplace. We've saved over £250,000 in agency fees and supply staff.
And one of the big topics at the moment is obviously social media, smartphones, and how that impacts on student mental health. Social media is the bane of our lives in terms of the content that our young people are accessing. Can you explain a bit about the upstairs-downstairs brain?
Our upstairs brain is prefrontal cortex, so that's our, like I said, logical thinking, problem solving.
And what would you say are some of the warning signs that people could look out for when something's gone from a level 2 into a level 3 and like the immediate actions to take in that moment? Welcome to Trust Matters Lessons in Leadership, the podcast where we dive into the big ideas, challenges, and practical strategies shaping trusts and schools today. In this episode, we're joined by Becci Owen, Assistant National Mental Health Lead at Oasis Community Learning, one of the largest trusts in the country. With a background in teaching, safeguarding, and emotional well-being, Becci now helps lead a multi-disciplinary national mental health team, supporting pupils, staff, and families across the country. In this conversation, Becci walks us through what it really takes to build a meaningful, sustainable, and scalable mental health offer. And she shares some actionable insights for any trust looking to do the same. Hi Becci, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. We like to start by going back to the beginning, where you started, how you got to where you are now. So how did you become the Assistant National Mental Health Lead at Oasis Community Learning?
Well, it's a journey. So I started teaching in 2009, qualified as a PE teacher. Started working within North Manchester in a couple of different schools, different guises, PE teacher, science teacher, head of health and social care. But in my last role, I ended up as head of department for health and social care, safeguard lead and mental health lead. And to be honest, I wasn't necessarily looking. Love my kids, love my community, love my school. But this advert just popped up on LinkedIn. So applied for the job. Got shortlisted, 6 candidates, and I was the only external. So I was a bit like on the day. But yeah, so I was sat in a very small academy trust, and this opportunity just looked too good to be true, if I'm completely honest, to be able to go and do what I was doing on a daily basis, but for more children, more families, more communities. Fantastic.
That's amazing. And can you walk us through the structure of the Oasis National Mental Health team?
Yeah. So we sit under the Safeguarding Mental Health Director for Oasis Community Learning. Myself and my boss, Erin, who's the National Mental Health Lead, run the team that runs regionally. So within each region, there's a senior mental health practitioner, and they come from a range of backgrounds. So some are registered mental health nurses, psychotherapists, adult nurses, and general nurses. So they sit and run their own region, and depending on the size of the region and the need, we have primary mental health practitioners as well. So again, from a range of backgrounds, CBT therapists, youth workers. So some regions run differently, but each have the senior. So Erin's vision was we can, as long as we get the right people in, we can teach them the skills. So yeah, the variety of background is vast, which is fantastic.
And for trusts who might be looking to build on something they already have or start something from scratch in terms of like a mental health support offer at a central location, how would you say they could go about starting something like that and build the foundations to eventually grow to something similar to what you guys have?
I think it's around looking at your need, looking what the gaps are. So Erin's vision was around looking at what's currently in place. So she looked at each academy to see what their provision was. A range had the MHST, which is the mental health support team from the NHS, and some had internal, external counsellors. So what we found was the MHST looks at low-level early intervention, those kind of awareness sessions. And then we had this big gap between the children that kind of tip that threshold, so they're a little bit too risky for that service, but then they're not quite hitting the CAMS threshold. So we needed something to kind of address that gap, because those students are the ones that need to be able to see a mental health practitioner. And I think looking at the whole school approach is key. Being able to offer that varied CPD, and giving staff on the ground the opportunity to have skills, knowledge, and a bit of confidence around being able to support these young people and being those emotionally available adults. So that early intervention starts in every classroom, and just puts in that layer of support before necessarily having to come up into our team. And another one is providing that supervision for those staff that are on the ground. So if they have been identified as somebody's emotionally available adult, someone who can check in on them and make sure that everything's going okay, and just monitor, because they might then need some support later on down the line, is being able to get in and support those staff as well. So supporting the supporters, essentially. I think they're really key areas.
And how do you measure the success of those interventions? I think everyone in education always wants to know, what's the outcome? Where's this led to? What has the impact been? What are some of those key things that you take a look at to see if things are working? And what happens if, say, they're not working? Then what do you put in place then?
So we have a predefined pathway for every one of our practitioners, from referral to discharge for every student and every member of staff. Essentially, we're using clinical outcome measures such as RCADS, goal-based outcomes, GAD-7, PHQ-9, but essentially it's down to each individual practitioner. So once they've done the mental health assessment and during their formulation, they can decide which clinical outcomes best to support what they're intending to do with that young person or staff member. In terms of looking at the data, that's something that strategically Erin and I do, but also each practitioner will have a look midway through the intervention, redo the assessment, see if things are looking like they're improving, and if not, maybe go back to the drawing board, back to formulation, and see if there's a different way forward for that young person or staff member.
And for trust leaders listening, what are some of those outcomes that you've seen that you can speak to say, like, this is working? Like, these are some of the cases we've seen, or the numbers. Like, I feel like people really pay attention when they can see it, like, and hear it and think, oh, okay, like this is what real, and it does work.
Yeah, I think in terms of our student offer, one of the best stats that we have in terms of our data is we run something called Oasis Encounter, which is a therapeutic intervention for parents. But when we've run that alongside actually providing one-to-one support with the young person, and taking that holistic view on the family and their needs, we've seen, and we're talking about students that are persistently absent, that's wrapped up in that emotionally based reasons for not getting into school. And we've seen an increase in 60% in attendance, when we're looking at changing things for both parents and the student at the same time. And in terms of staff, we looked at some data, and again, we'll have to dig a little bit deeper in this for this academic year. But just providing that instant support for staff when they've been referred into our team, and wrapping around to just try and keep them happy and healthy within the workplace. We saved over £250,000 in supply and agency fees because we were able to keep the staff member in school, and doing what they love.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? When you hear it like that, it truly is making a difference. And you mentioned Oasis Encounter there. Could you just explain a little bit to the listeners about what that is and how it works?
So yes, our Oasis Encounter programme, it's based on non-violence resistance therapy. So we've taken those principles and created this intervention for our parents and carers. Essentially what it does is looks to raise parental presence within the home, teach them de-escalation skills, prioritise connection with their children, and also help to address those unwanted behaviours. It's absolutely heartening. You have a group of people that start on session one, and by the end they are a full community that's are individual supporters for them. So they go from that feeling of being isolated on their own to having a community around them that are rooting for them and what might be going on for them in their homes. We have over 500 parents that have graduated, and each one of them would recommend the course to other parents, which is absolutely fantastic. The course runs 5 times a week, some in the evenings, some throughout the day. So we're trying to increase the flexibility so parents can actually access the course. We also run it in English, Urdu and Roma. So yeah, again, trying to increase the net as it was. The course is run by encounter facilitators, but we also have parent practitioners, which is absolutely invaluable. So these parents have graduated from the course and then have decided that they want to join the course, to just enlighten the people that are starting the course that this does make a change. And they are the hope bringers, so they can really bring to life what the course is about, because they've tried it, it's made a difference, and they want to bang the drum about it and let people know that they're safe and they're contained and held, and things will get better.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like really full circle, isn't it, when they've been through that and they're more than happy to come back and speak to the success of it. And how, if a parent in one of the schools is having issues at home, did they come forward, or is the course how does that work in terms of who goes first and saying, I want to do the course, or this might be there for you?
Yeah, in terms of schools, we try to push it out as in every avenue possible. But a lot of especially our parent-facing colleagues within schools, they know about Encounter, so they'd probably think this might be the right step forward to help support this family.
Yeah. And for other trusts listening, obviously, you guys are lucky that you're a big scale, like you've got a really big structure and a big foundation. What are some of those small things that other smaller trusts or just schools listening could take away and think these are some of the small things we could put in place when it comes to that parent engagement and building those bridges between schools and parents, especially when it comes to like pupil experience at home and in the school?
I think it's just around that collaboration. We need to make sure parents know that we know that they are the person that holds that information, so we can collaboratively work together. They are the expert on their own child, so bringing them in a comfortable way is absolutely key, and building that relationship, because essentially what we're seeing in some of our cases is the child might be absolutely fine in school, completely masking, going home and letting everything out because they've spent a full day masking. So it's kind of making sure that we're listening to parents, taking them seriously and inviting them in to see how we can collaboratively tackle what might be going on for that young person.
So we're coming up to the 6-week holidays. Obviously, pupils will be then spending the majority of their time at home, won't be in school for that time. What do your team put in place to make sure that pupils who aren't going to be in school for 6 weeks, who may be experiencing mental health issues throughout the rest of the academic year, have things in place to make sure that they feel supported and secure throughout those holidays?
Yeah, I think it's key. So a lot of our wind-up work, so we'll probably start it at the start of summer too, is ensuring that students have those strategies for self-help and have that understanding of what might trigger them. But then equally, that information is transferred to parents as well. So we'll put a safety plan around them. It'll be around worsening advice. So if your child's mental health gets worse, this is what you need to do. So it could be 111. It could be taking them to A&E. And also signposting them to local and national services that can support. But also keeping the school up to date, because the safeguarding team works all the way through. So and equally our team does. So Erin and I are all year round. So safeguarding mental health leads can contact us and we can provide that support that we do all year round anyway.
This podcast is brought to you by The Key. Help your team thrive this term and every term after when you join the 17,000 schools who are already leaning on our trusted support. With everything from need-to-knows and fact sheets to interactive tools and live leadership classes, we support your whole team to make an impact and navigate the challenges that you face right now. Get immediate access to the comprehensive support your team deserves when you become a whole school member today. Visit thekeysupport.com to find out more. So you use a mental health matrix to assess both pupils and staff in the Oasis. How does that work in practice, and how might smaller trusts adopt something similar to that practice?
Yeah, so we have a mental health matrix, different one for primary, secondary, and one for staff members. Essentially, all it is something that every school can use when they've had a little bit of training around it, to use the right kind of language, that understanding, but also to help us to put data to need. It allows any member of staff to be able to triage and assess against on where they might come in on that matrix. So essentially, the mental health matrix is a 4-level matrix, and it looks at impact on learning behaviour, attendance, risk to self and risk to others. So level 1 and 2 is generally contained within schools. So any pastoral interventions, when it tips into level 2, level 1's no concern. Level 2, we might need to put a little bit of something around this young person and just keep an eye on them. So in each academy, that looks completely different depending on their provision and their universal offer. For level 3 is a consideration that they might need a referral into our team. This is when there's been a significant change and we're noticing that things are starting to impact on daily functioning, for example. Level 3, not every level 3 will be picked up by our team, but again, like I mentioned earlier, we'll support the supporters. So it'll be advice, guidance and support around what they should do to help support that young person, keep an eye on it and monitor it. And then if they feel that the risk has escalated, then they refer up into our team. Level 4, we're talking about crisis level. So it could be that a young person moves through those levels, or it could be just an acute issue that's tipped them to that level 4 stage. But yeah, referrals come into our team and we'd pick it up. So it's really good because staff have a clear understanding of what hits what level and when to seek that advice and guidance from mental health practitioners.
And what would you say are some of the warning signs that people could look out for when something's gone from a level 2 into a level 3, and like the immediate actions to take in that moment?
I think it comes down to relationships, and we could talk about lots of different kind of symptoms or signs and symptoms that you could look out for. But it's essentially, if you've got a relationship with that young person or that staff member, it's just noticing that they are different from their own individual norm. So if a child was once quite keen to answer questions, likes to get involved, and then all of a sudden has become withdrawn, looking a bit unkempt, looking completely different, not interacting with peers or not interacting with you as an adult, then it's time to be a bit curious. And we talk about professional curiosity all the time. If you notice something, just ask that question. And I think it's around confidence. You don't need to be a mental health practitioner to be able to just have that conversation with a young person that you've got that relationship with.
So some pupils might not be as keen to open up. How would you address those conversations and really try and get to the root of what their issues are?
It happens more than you think. In terms of that, we'd probably elongate the intervention time and we'd just start with relationship building. So all of our practitioners would have a array of tricks and tools to just engage that young person. It could be double, it could be just generally trying to find out about who they are, what they like, those interests as a kind of hook and a way in to actually starting the work. And for some of our young people, that takes a long time because it might be trust that's impacted on how they're feeling. So it's about getting down to their level, meeting them where they're at, not expecting them to be able to tell us and open up, because a lot of young people don't have that emotional literacy to actually explain what's going on. So it's, meeting them where they're at and giving them all the time that they need to be able to feel comfortable and go there with you.
And there's so many demands on school time, especially for teachers in schools and SLT. How can you practically integrate mental health support so it doesn't feel like another bolt on, or it feels like something that's an overwhelm and they have to think about on top of what they have to do all day, every day?
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? Time, resource, everything. The approach that we've taken is just collaborative working. We flex our working patterns or whatever is needed by that individual academy to make sure that we can meet their needs. It's not about us, it's about them, and what can we bring and how can we support. And I think it's really key that you go alongside a school, so we're not doing something to them, we're doing it with them. So yeah, I think it's a two-way communication stream to see what's working. And sometimes we're ironing it out and sometimes we get there quite quickly. But it's just being flexible and adaptive to the needs.
And what sort of staff training have you found to be most effective in building confidence and people can do it in application?
I would say the adolescent brain in trauma-informed practice. I think giving staff the understanding of what actually might be going on for these young people, and also staff themselves, especially if they're on the younger side, because brains don't mature until the 30s, has been vital. It's changed practice. So, for example, we talk about flipping the lid. So if a young person has their brains not integrated, upstairs, downstairs brains aren't integrated, they have no access to rational thought, logical thinking, communication. So we need to get them to a place where they're regulated, they're soothed, they feel comfortable to then try and address what's just gone on. So it's changed practice in that sense. So we have that understanding ourselves as practitioners that now's not the time to talk to that young person, let them come down, and then we can do everything from there. So a little bit of brain or neuroscience goes a long way, I think, just having a good understanding of what might be going on.
Can you explain a bit about the upstairs downstairs brain? I feel like people would be interested to learn a bit
absolutely.
about that.
So it's based on Bruce Perry's hand model of the brain. So we talk about the downstairs brain, which is our emotional brain, and it's what keeps us alive. So that's where fight, flight, freeze is located. So if we're in danger, it'll stop us from being attacked. If we're being attacked, we'll run away. If we need to stay still, we'll go into freeze. So that's our amygdala down at the bottom. So that's our downstairs brain. Our upstairs brain is prefrontal cortex. So that's our, like I said, logical thinking, problem solving. And when the brain's integrated, that's how we function. We're regulated. We're able to respond to whatever's coming at us in terms of maybe within the classroom, intellectually, emotionally, all of those things. Anything happens to kind of tip us, and I've seen it done fantastically in some schools where some children can actually just use the hand signal as if to say, I'm getting triggered, something's coming, I need a bit of space or a little bit of time, and there'll be a plan wrapped around that. But essentially, once a young person or a staff member has become dysregulated, upstairs and downstairs don't talk to each other. So we're operating entirely from that emotional brain. So we're trying to keep ourselves safe. In order to connect with that young person, we need to regulate, make sure that integration's back in place. We've got access to that upstairs brain. We can think about things rationally. Then we can pop that support around.
I think that hand symbol is a really nice way. And is that something like how do you speak to the pupils around these sort of issues and teach them about the disconnect and what then happens and then how to then communicate that to their teachers?
Yeah, so we do it slightly different for the young people. We give them names. So the amygdala is the meerkat. So as you can imagine, a meerkat always on alert, always looking around. We have the hippocampus, which is the elephant. So the way that we describe that is that it's almost like a record player. So it's the memory and emotion around certain experiences that you've had before. So if we've got the meerkat and the elephant in cahoots, so the meerkat detects some threat, the elephant will chime in and say, well, remember when this happened last time, Mr. Jones shouted at us. So then that gets that alert system up higher, threat system, and then that might then drive the behaviour that comes from there. So what we say is we need to try and bring in our wise owl, which is the prefrontal cortex. So we need the wise owl to just come in and disrupt the meerkat and the elephant and say, but yeah, that happened one time, but do you remember last time he just brought us in, asked, we went for a walk and we talked about what was going on and we were okay. So we talk about it like that, and can be specific scenarios, so we can ask them to kind of think of a time where they felt like they weren't in control or whatever's going on for that young person. But then we'll have a plan around that. So if they do need to regulate, what's their regulation plan? How can we co-regulate with that young person to bring them down to then have those conversations?
And how do you embed that within time in school? Like, is that part of the curriculum and PSHE lessons? Like, when are these conversations around like mental health and well-being had with the pupils in the academies?
So that would generally come from our team, but then we're also delivering CPD around
Mhm.
it. So it is delivered to all staff. In terms of how that works in each academy, it's completely up to them. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then you look at primary, secondary, it's all very different.
And you mentioned your CPD offer. Reflective practice is a big part of your CPD offer. Why do you find this is so powerful for senior mental health leads and safeguarding leads? And how could other trusts replicate that sort of thing?
I think it's just a safe space to contain our colleagues that are working in schools. It's just a place to kind of work through any kind of difficulties, learn some strategies, but also work things out with other like-minded colleagues. Um, it's I was a DSL and a senior mental health lead, so to have that opportunity to sit with your colleagues, and if something's feeling really, really tough, be able to kind of like a working solution group and have that time and space for someone to come in and give you some advice
Mhm.
on something maybe they've faced similar, but it's just a space to feel safe and held, and then be able to go and tackle whatever that situation is. All of our practitioners are trained, so they're trained with the Tavistock. So I would definitely encourage trusts to invest in that. And it's something we can support if they need any support in getting that started, because I think it's vital.
Could you explain a bit about that training in case people haven't heard of that before?
Yeah, it's the Tavistock, so it's run through the NHS. So it's a really good course. I'm actually starting mine in September, but it's a 10-week course that really drills down in what reflective practice is, and being able to hold that reflective space
Mhm.
and ensure that the person who's brought whatever it is that they need to speak about is heard, and we are working and focusing on that specific thing, but also trying to keep almost personal opinion out of it, but giving that practical professional advice to that person.
And we hear a lot in the media, and I also hear a lot in my job working with schools about staff mental health, and especially when it comes to like retention, and staff are really struggling with their well-being, especially those in senior leadership roles. The pressure is huge
Mm.
in the sector. How do you make sure that staff mental health support doesn't just stop at signposting? I think a lot of people get to a place where, they might say, like, these are the places you can go if you get there. But how do you make sure it goes further than signposting, and actually there's, like you said, like a wraparound care within the academy or the trust that you're working in?
So similar to the students, we have a staff mental health matrix, so available to all line managers. Essentially, level 3, level 4 again come to us, but it's being able to provide that immediate support. So access to a mental health practitioner, a mental health assessment if needed, formulation around what the next steps are. It could be helping them with a self-referral to talking therapies through the NHS, for example. It could be they just need a space because things are starting to get on top of them, and it could be something within work, it could be something within the home life. It doesn't really matter in that sense, but we can just contain them and just allow them to maybe have a minute, talk about the things that are impacting them. And for a lot of our staff, that is just what they need, like an independent, safe space where they can just let things go. Um, but then equally, there might be some staff that need a little bit more. But I think it is like you alluded to in the question, it's around about that immediate wraparound. So you've got somebody to talk to immediately, to hopefully prevent things from getting worse. But I think it's just around staff having the knowledge that support is there should they need it.
And what are 3 practical tools or interventions that you think every trust should have in place to help with these sort of things?
I think making sure that there's a crisis support plan for the parents and carers at home. So if a young person should be in crisis, it's signposting to services, and also a little bit of information on what to do in that eventuality. And I think we need to offer the student themselves that safe space where they're held and feel heard. And again, if we go back to the regulation part of it, making sure there's somewhere they can just have a little think, come back down, and then we can talk about it. And I think in terms of that, we need our staff to be able to have these conversations with these young people, but also for our staff, the opportunity to talk to a mental health practitioner on the day to ensure that everything that could be done has been done. And that's essentially why we've developed Mind Edu Collective.
And what is the Mind Edu Collective? Could you explain a bit about that?
It's a programme that we've been working on essentially from feedback from our schools. It's the best bits that we could potentially package to other smaller trusts without the infrastructure that have massively helped the staff within our schools. So it's going to be a collective of schools that can tap into the resources that we have, things like reflective practice, inset day training for whole school staff, contextual to whatever the needs might be, a termly network meeting, resources, just a wraparound. But I think the best bit of that is the opportunity to have access to a same-day consultation with a mental health practitioner. So if you're sat with a young person that's disclosed suicide ideation, which is usually on the last Friday before a 2-week half term, you have the presence or the peace of mind to be able to speak to a mental health practitioner and just double check that everything you've done is all that you could do in that situation. And I think if I think back to me sat in my old role, to have the ability to speak to somebody, knowing that I'd done everything I can, leaving for that 2-week break would be better than sitting on it for the whole 2 weeks wondering, have I done everything I could for that young person?
And what would you say are some of those top things that if we were to speak to an academy in Oasis, that they'd say these are the things that are really helping us?
I think the ability to talk to a mental health practitioner. So through teams, there's always a duty senior practitioner on. So if you are unsure about something, if you just need that confidence that you've done everything that you could in that moment, I think that's invaluable. I'd couple that alongside the opportunity to meet as senior mental health leads, to be able to bring the issues that are contextually happening within their academies and see if that's regional, and see what regional support others might be tapping into, but also where we can step in and provide that support as well.
And if you had 5 minutes with a trust leader listening to this today, and you could say to them, this is one thing that you should change or start to change tomorrow about your culture or the way that you do things around mental health, what would that thing be?
So I think going back, I've previously mentioned it, but that compassion and connection before correction. I think investing in your staff and ensuring that they can bring their full selves to work and do the best for the young people is again invaluable. I think if we look after our staff, they'll be the best for our students.
Governor Hub is your board's one-stop shop to access all the workflow tools, guidance, and training it needs to support great governance and make a difference all year round. Get immediate access to Governor Hub when you become a whole school member today. Head to thekeysupport.com to find out more. So as well as supporting the parents, you have a youth version of Oasis Encounter. How did that involve, and what do you do within that support for the pupils and students?
Yeah, so what we've learned from Oasis Encounter is it has an impact on relationships and not just that parent-child relationship. So as a team, we decided to take the principles and make them work for young people. And it's mainly aimed at young people that might have issues with relationships, peers, bullying, that kind of group of students. But it gives them the skills to be able to understand escalation and know their own de-escalation strategies, to be able to kind of put in boundaries for their friendships and their relationships, and how to kind of deliver that information in a way that's going to keep those relationships healthy, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely increased the engagement within school because they're having less time off. It's increased that sense of belonging because they want to come to school. So it's kind of aimed at those students that are having that low level kind of issues with generally peers, and bringing them together. So it's a group intervention, which it's great to see. Again, they take ownership of their spaces as pupils do amazingly, and they work together. And they've got a new kind of friendship by the end of it, because they've all experienced this intervention together. It's really good to see.
And one thing we hear a lot about is obviously pupil mental health on the other side of the pandemic. What's your experience of that been like in your academies? Has it been quite acute, the difference post-pandemic, especially around like emotional-based school avoidance? And how have these interventions helped with those sort of things?
I think it's difficult because a lot of places didn't have pre-pandemic data. I think there's been a shift, but there's been a shift culturally for students and staff. I think in terms of our team, having that matrix and having staff and a referral pathway or an option for some support is great, because we are better at identifying, because mental health or student mental health it's everywhere, isn't it? It's in the media. It is huge, and as it should. So we've kind of increased our knowledge around mental health and also the support around the young people. So I think having our team come in and provide that intervention, like I say, because that was the gap. We've got these students that are a little bit too risky here, but not risky enough. So they still need that support. If anything, they're the ones that need the support the most, because they're almost being forgotten.
And one of the big topics at the moment is obviously social media, smartphones, and how that impacts on student mental health. What is your opinion on that? Obviously, this is something you work in all the time, you're an expert on. What would you say your view is?
I'd say, alongside probably most educators, that social media is the bane of our lives in terms of the content that our young people are accessing, the standards that they're holding themselves to, and so on and so forth. Obviously, lots of positives. If you speak to young people, they like to do a makeup tutorial, for example. But yeah, having spoken to some young people recently, they are absolutely calling for it to be regulated. Their use, what they can access, it's profound to hear this from students' voice. And I think a lot of it gets lost because we're not necessarily asking the young people how they feel around social media. But yeah, I think it's impacting. It's things like being able to be pulled into a group chat with people that you don't necessarily know, be called all the names, and then kicked out of a group chat, and it just compounds how young people might be feeling. And I think it's difficult enough to be growing up in this digital era, this digital age, without the terrible side of what social media brings.
And in terms of smartphone use in your academies, is there a central decision around that, or is it up to the academies to decide how they're used in the classrooms?
Yeah, it's an academy by academy basis, but a lot of our academies have no smartphones within school. However, we are an iPad trust. So we have Oasis Horizon, so every young person has access to an iPad. But that was to kind of address the digital poverty as well. But then again, it's regulated, and there's all the safety measures in place, which alerts our safeguarding team should they misuse it. But yeah, I think a lot of our academies are a no smartphone academy.
So we know there's a crisis in the SEND system in the sector at the moment. Are you seeing a correlation between SEND and mental health referrals in your trust?
Yes, there is, from what we can gather from referral and then potentially going back to school for consultation, is a lot of the needs and the mental health needs might be wrapped up in that undiagnosed SEND, or it could be diagnosed SEND. So I've actually started to take the SENCO qualification just to bring that expertise into our triage and referral. But I think it's the rise in social emotional mental health, which sits under the SEND system within school, is massive. But then it's, for some of our young people, it's not their primary need. It's as a result of other SEND needs that potentially aren't being met because the system is in crisis. We do a lot within Oasis, so we have that separate inclusion team. We've got something called the Oasis Way, which we're rolling out nationally, but that's got a focus around around SEND and the waves for identification. But yeah, I think there is definitely a correlation between mental health and SEND.
So another thing that we hear a lot about is behaviour in classrooms, behaviour getting worse is kind of the thing that you hear a lot. Is that the case, do you think? And how have the things that you've been putting in place, the interventions, have they had an impact on behaviour in the classroom?
Behaviour, it's got that negative connotation, hasn't it? In terms of behaviour, I think we've done a lot of work in all of our academies to understand that behaviour is just a form of communication. So if we are that professionally curious person, we are looking to work out what is the communication, what are they trying to communicate, what's going on for that young person, what's their lived experience, where can we provide that support. So I think in terms of all the headlines that put all doom and gloom, I think that trauma-informed approach and having that understanding of the lived experience of that young person individually and collectively as a school, by truly knowing the students that turn up at your door, we can provide that support and we can wrap around that young person. So it could be a referral into our team because something might have happened that's triggered that behaviour. And if we go back to the brain, that's triggered that response, and it's not necessarily just the child driving that behaviour. It's lots of things that are going on. So can we look underneath the surface and dig and see? Something that will always stick with me from my trauma-informed diploma was we are firm on the boundaries, gentle on the child. So absolutely, if something needs to happen as a consequence, that's the boundary, and they've broken that boundary. However, the way that we deliver that, the way we talk to our young person, the way that we bring them down before we even go into consequences is key.
I think that's really powerful, and it'd be maybe quite nice to hear, was there other things that really stood out to you when you did your trauma-informed diploma that people could take away and really make them think, like change the mindset around some of those things?
Yeah, another one that stuck out was curious, not furious. So again, digging into that professional curiosity, can we take a step back and understand what might be going on for that young person? And I think another thing is as adults being able to recognise when we're triggered, because sometimes we're not always the best person to be dealing with that situation, because if we're triggered ourselves, our brain's not integrated, then things escalate. That comes into Oasis Encounter as well, but just having the awareness of yourself to think, right, just need to take a step back here.
And how would that look in a classroom if there's an escalating situation between a pupil and a teacher? What would you say the best intervention is? Maybe a pupil's calling out all the time, or they're dysregulated, the teacher's then triggered by that, they're having a really hard day. What would you say? I know every situation is different and there's so much nuance, but as a bit of advice in that situation, what would you say are the best next steps to make sure that that doesn't escalate to an out-of-hand situation?
I think it's down to structures and processes within individual schools, but having the ability to ask for help or have somebody nearby to kind of help in that situation is key. Self-awareness, but also just create a little bit of distance between yourself and the young person. It could be that they have a regulation plan, so they're allowed to then go and follow their regulation plan. It looks different in different academies, but I think essentially it's just knowing, and then whatever that procedure is that's within the culture of the school, I'd say.
And we like to finish the podcast with a 4-question quickfire.
Okay.
So the first question is, what do you think is the single biggest challenge facing the education sector at the moment?
I would say staff retention. In order to build these relationships with our young people, we need consistency in staff. So if we're not having staff come in, stay long enough to build these relationships, then that's having an impact on our students and their feeling of safety and belonging.
In second question, what motivates you on difficult days?
The children, the absolute end goal. Come into education for a reason. I've deviated slightly from the classroom, and never say never at returning, but knowing that what I do, on a daily basis impact so many more children and families and communities. So yeah, absolutely.
Third question, what has been your proudest achievement in your career so far?
I think we won a Nursing Times Award, so the first education establishment to win a Nursing Time Award last year for mental health in schools. But I think getting this job, I think to be able to step out my comfort zone, but be able to bring that knowledge that I've amassed over the 14-year teaching career I had, I think, a challenge, and I've enjoyed it.
And final question, what are you most looking forward to the rest of this academic year?
Oh, summer term is the best term. I think just those closing down kind of work that we're doing. So an opportunity for the team to actually reflect on all the hard work that they've done over the year, but also start those preparations on how we can be better next year.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Becci. I mean, you've given so much helpful insight and advice to a topic that's huge. And I feel like it's only going to become more important as the world evolves. So thank you so much, Becci.
Thanks for having me.
That brings us to the end of today's episode, and what a powerful conversation it's been. Becci reminded us that mental health has to be a leadership priority. Whether it's recognise the early signs of need, supporting staff beyond signposting, or building trust with families, her message is super clear. When we put wellbeing at the centre, we create the conditions for everyone in our school communities to thrive. A big thank you to Becci for sharing her insight and experience with us today. If this episode struck a chord, don't forget to share it with your team and like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.